Thanks for listening to Creative Control. While I have you here, please consider supporting Youth Empowerment and Support Services, otherwise known as YES. Based in Edmonton, Alberta, YES provides immediate and low-barrier overnight and day shelter, temporary supportive housing, and individualized wraparound supports for young people aged 15 to 24. They work collaboratively within a network of care focused on the prevention of youth homelessness by providing youth with the necessary supports to stabilize their housing, improve their well-being, build life skills, connect with community, and avoid re-entry into homelessness. Learn more about how to donate or otherwise support YES by visiting yess.org.
Creative control, creative control. Comedy, art, and sometimes rock and roll. Let's do a public opinion poll. Raise your hand if you love creative control. 'Cause when Vish is unleashed, well, Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. I was just working on a tribute song to my favorite podcast, Creative Control, with Vish Khanna. My name is Matthias, and I play in a band called The Burning Hell, but more importantly, I support Creative Control on Patreon, and I think you should too. Quality long-form arts journalism is like a magical talking unicorn. It definitely exists, but it can be really hard to find. Fortunately for us, Vish makes it easy with hundreds of funny, thought-provoking, well-researched and engaging interviews with artists from all over the world. Your flexible monthly donation on Patreon will get you plenty of special exclusive treats and help Vish keep his podcast well-fed and cared for properly, the way a magical unicorn deserves.
To make your flexible monthly donation to Creative Control, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control today.
Mamadou Soleimani and Michael Coltun are each talented musicians who respectively reside in Tawa in Niger and New York City in the United States of America. Around the world, Soleimani is best known as Mdou Moctar, a namesake he shares with his explosive and beloved Tuareg-infused rock and roll band. On May 3rd, 2024, Matador Records released the 7th album by Mdou Moctar to worldwide acclaim from critics and loyal fans alike. It's called Funeral for Justice, and it prompted Mdou and Mikey to return to this show for a nice talk about things like singing new songs about problems around the world and not just in Africa, how they landed on an album title that suits the lyrics and tone of Funeral for Justice, jet lag and how traveling from Niger to New York can make you a little sleepy, why doing interviews is so important to explain the songs of Mdou Moctar, themes of trust on the new album, but also how trust between the players has made Mdou Moctar a better band, why their music and vocals might incorporate repetition, Mikey's new tape label, Purplish Records, and Marc Masters' recent book about cassette history and culture, new Mdou Moctar music on the horizon, and philanthropic projects, touring the world again, other future plans, and much more. A part of the Entertainment One network with the support of listeners just like you who follow and subscribe to this listener-supported and donor-driven podcast. Spread the word about it. Leave nice reviews and ratings on your podcast platforms if you have a moment. And make flexible monthly donations at patreon.com/Creative Control, which is the primary and most reliable way for podcasters like me to make a living, and where a $6 subscription means you can access every single episode of this show since we started the Patreon in its entirety, which is not the case without that subscription. In fact, the episode today, the one we're listening to together now, I guess I'm talking during it and you're listening to me, this one is not available in its entirety unless you are a $6 subscriber on my Patreon. So there's other tiers, of course. You can do $10 a month, you can do $4 a month, and they have different benefits, of course, but $6 a month gets you every single episode in its entirety. and it is my primary source of income right now. So if you'd like to support me and the show and access full conversations with my guests, please visit patreon.com/creativecontrol today. Thank you. With additional support from Blackbird Music, a wonderful record store with bricks and mortar locations in Edmonton and Calgary, Alberta, and a great website, blackbird.ca, where you can order records. You can order them to pick them up in the stores, or you can order them to have them shipped right to your house. Say you want yourself a copy of Funeral for Justice by Mdou Moctar. Well, visit blackbird.ca and type in that information in the search box there, and if they can get you a copy of this record, I'm sure they will. Plus, in-kind support from independent businesses like Pizza Trocadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, Ontario, and Granddad's Donuts in Hamilton, Ontario. This is episode 874 of Creative Control, featuring the lovely and talented Mdou Moctar and Mikey Coltun, with your host, me, Vish Khanna. Please enjoy this excerpt from our conversation, and to hear the whole thing, again, subscribe to the show at patreon.com/creativecontrol. Mdou, let's dial into that differentiation, I suppose, between the last album and this one. To my ear, it's very ferocious. It's an explosive album. I've thought of you as an outspoken songwriter in the past, but this feels particularly outspoken. What was different about your approach to making Funeral for Justice compared to Afrique Victime?
Yeah, the Funeral for Justice, I feel like it's the continue for the Africa Victim, because this music, it's like, for me, it's like Siri, because we just keep it like talking about what is going on around the world. And then if you see in Ilana to Funeral for Justice, it's kind of like we talk a lot about like the politic side, and then about the crime, about the injustice, like in Ilana we talking about like this, the woman need the support, and then in the same time Africa Victim we talking about what happened in Africa. And then like Funeral for Justice, it's kind of like big than all what we talking about it. It's like big deal. Well, here we talking about the world in general, not just like Africa.
Right.
We talking about like the world in general, what is going on around the world.
Do you have a sense of what inspired you to take on subject matter pertaining to the whole world?
It's what like happening in different places in the world.
Yeah.
You see, like in different places, like the world is going crazy, and then that inspired me, like to say the justice doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see what happening in Ukraine. You see what happening in Russia as well. You see about Iran, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Mali, Niger too. Yeah, different places like that. I can tell the name of all, but everyone knows about it. Yeah, it's what inspired me, like to say the justice doesn't exist. And then the problem for African people with the border, and then the exile, traveling, like the young generation travel in the desert, they die in the desert, and then they die in the Mediterranean Ocean as well. And then, all those stuff inspiring me, like to say that justice doesn't exist anymore.
Right. Yes. It is very heavy and it's very impactful. Mikey, I want to ask you about your perspective on both the sound of the band on this album, maybe compared to the work you've done in the past. But I also want to follow up on what Mdou was just saying about how the calamities around the world are directly impacting him and influencing his songwriting. You work so closely with him. Do you have a perspective on, let's start there. Do you have a perspective on his lyrical direction on this particular album?
When we tour, it's every night we're working on music. We're working on these tunes. It's like you can come to an Mdou Moctar show every day for a year and you'll see a different show. It's always changing. Lyrics are changing, music's changing, and throughout the touring, Mdou and I would talk about the meanings of these songs. And specifically, we knew we were going to record the Funeral for Justice, so it was about talking about what songs we're going to do. And through all of this happening, there was a lot going on in the world. So while it was started as like this is what's happening in Africa, it ended with like, oh, this stuff's going on all around the world. And to what Mdou's saying too is like we met this kid at a festival in the Netherlands who was from, I think he was from Benin or Nigeria. I don't remember, but yeah. We were talking about how he got there, and it was like, oh yeah, he took a boat. He was been traveling for 2 weeks to get to Africa to find, as he says, a better life. And it was just such a heartfelt story, and it just inspired a lot of the concept for the record. And talking about Afrique Team to Funeral for Justice, there was the idea of kind of making it more of a conceptual record, of a concept from beginning to end to tell the story. And, I think that what we did on Funeral for Justice is exactly that, as opposed to Afrique Team, where it was kind of the breakout records for people who did not know Mdou Moctar. We signed to a bigger label. It's kind of like an introduction, and there was a lot going on that record. But this one was like, hey, this is stuff that's very important to us, and it's song by song. It tells that story.
As I recall, Afrique Victime had some field recordings, footsteps, things like that sort of, it kind of jarred you as a listener. You felt like you were entering a place, and I thought that gave it a bit of a conceptual framework. You're saying Funeral for Justice feels like you've doubled down on a conceptual framework on some level. Is that a way of putting it?
So Afrique Team had it like a sonic story that it was telling. Yeah. But lyrically speaking, Funeral for Justice has a lyrical story that it tells throughout the record.
Yes.
So while all the records from Alana till Funeral for Justice are a record and they tell a story, Funeral for Justice not only sonically explores that, but also lyrically.
Okay. I'll come back to you to talk about the sonics of this record and the production in a moment, Mikey, because you have a production credit here. So who better to talk about producing this album than you, I would say. But I want to go to Mdou for a second. Mdou, Mikey was talking about how you guys would talk about the songs that you were working on. Do you work on the words together? And if so, did Mikey help you kind of figure out what you wanted to say in some ways?
I write the song by my own self, and then the music we work the music together. But writing the song, that it's my job. I do it by my own self. Okay,
so when he says that you would talk about them, did anything that you talked about with him or anyone in your band inform or influence what you wrote about?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, we did that. We did a lot of stuff together. Like even if I'm the writer for the song, I ask Mikey about what he think about this idea.
Yeah.
And then all time, even the name for the album, we find it with Michael. We take time to find it. I say this name, and then he say no. Yeah, it's not bad. He insults me always.
So you will ask people.
Yeah, he insults me in my face. If I get the name for album, I say, what did you think for this album? He say, it's not bad, but yeah, you are so close. Yeah, we work on this for a while. Like it's not that easy that people think.
Yeah.
Making album like it's crazy. It's something like you can't imagine. It's not that. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we spend a lot of time like to make stuff like that. even the name for album, it's not just we're gonna say, okay, this is the name for album. No, we take time, month by month.
Hey, thanks for listening to Creative Control, as always. As you may have heard me mention, I recently lost my day job, and I've had a few conversations with people since who've said, you had a day job? I thought your podcast was your day job. When I explained why it hasn't been my day job to a friend, he suggested I should share some of this information with people like you listening right now. So, in short, unless they have some giant exclusive $1 million contract, podcasters are not paid to make stuff by companies like Apple and Spotify. Podcasters do not make any money from streaming royalties. Ad revenue is dependent on a certain threshold of downloads each month, and even if your show is accessed 30,000 times a month, the income you get is actually really minimal. So podcasters like me usually make time in our lives to support our communities and our interests to make these shows, and our most reliable source of income for this work is in fact crowdfunding. In my case, it's my Patreon. So if you'd like to receive ad-free episodes earlier than everyone else, regular newsletters and blog posts, bonus audio content, and support my work, quite literally, please visit patreon.com/creativecontrol today. Thank you so much for listening to this excerpt from a recent episode of Creative Control with Vish Khanna. Every other Creative Control episode is only accessible to Patreon supporters. This is one of them. So please visit patreon.com/creativecontrol, become a subscriber today, and you won't miss a single episode in its entirety. There are links in the show notes to take you right there. So if you're able to, please do support this show and enjoy hours and hours of conversation. Thank you.